Hello, my name is Darren DeSanto. I am a member of Weston Library's Youth Advisory Group. Today I will be interviewing Antanas Sileika as part of the Weston Library Centenary project. Antanas is an accomplished critic and novelist who has created a novel based on life in Weston in the 1950s, among other things. Welcome, Antanas, and thank you for coming in today.
Thanks so much. Nice to be here.
So, for your first question, how long have you lived in Weston?
Well, I don't live in Weston now, but I was born and raised in Weston. I was born in '53 at Hubbard Memorial Hospital in Weston, and stayed here, I guess, until my early 20s, which would be until the late 70s when I went to Paris.
So, basically, what are your earliest memories of living here?
There's a lot of memories in there of living in Weston. I grew up in a particular time for Weston, when it was still a small town on the edge of Toronto, and then it gradually got swallowed up by Toronto. So all kinds of details about that time that are kind of interesting and kind of gone. So first, Weston was kind of self-sufficient at the time. Weston had its own city hall. I remember being a very little kid, I must have been 4 or 5, getting shots for measles and polio down there. We had our own police, we had our own mayor, and so we very much felt as if you lived in a community that was sufficient unto itself. But Toronto wasn't that far when I became a teenager. We were going to town, but it took an hour to get to town, 20 minutes to the bus, which on Sundays and Saturdays ran every 20 minutes. So you'd come down and you'd see, oh, there goes the bus, which means now a 20-minute wait, half an hour to get down to the Keele subway. So Toronto was around, but Toronto wasn't part of our day-to-day. And it was very interesting how much was local. So my mother bought her dresses here. My aunt tried to buy her dresses on time. In other words, she bought the dresses, but she had trouble paying for them, so that the dress store owners would come and knock on our door. Same with the insurance guy. My father didn't like to pay his insurance on time. As a matter of fact, he didn't pay for anything. So that from time to time we'd be a knock on the door, and there's the insurance agent, and they'd make him a cup of tea, and they'd sit down on the front, they'd have a little talk, and say, look, my father would say, I owe you 10, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 7 now. We'll be back in a few days. The Central Restaurant was a big deal too. The Central Restaurant, there were a couple of restaurants, but the Central Restaurant was, if you ever read Archie comics, it's actually so scary how close to Archie comics it was. There's something called Pop's Chocolate Shop in Archie comics. So the Central Restaurant was that place for us. When we were kids, we always went there for toasted danishes, which were really fried in butter, which was great. The more butter, the better. And butterscotch sundaes. But when I got a little older, they also became licensed. So we used to drink there too. So when I was a teenager, I remember turning 18 when they had the family change of drinking age to 18, going down to the Central Restaurant and drinking Zombie, which is the worst drink in the world. No one should ever drink that drink because it's very strong. And I was going back to school in the afternoon. Also, there's the whole world of Weston. It was not only the commercial strip here, where we bought our suits and my mother bought our dresses, but the world of hockey was very much a sports kind of place. You lived and died on the ice. So the Weston Arena down by the river was important too. Now, beyond that as well, the valley of the Humber River wasn't as developed in parks as it is now. The big storm had come through in 1954, the hurricane. I was too little for that because that happened in 54. I was born in 53. But all through the late 50s, by the time I was say 8 or 9, my mother would let us all go take off for the day. We'd go up and down the Humber River. And it was fascinating because the parts were pretty wild. And in the spring in particular, after the big rush of water and the water came down, we'd find things in the trees like toys or pieces of chairs. All the stuff that came washing down. It felt like the Nile in Egypt or something after the flood. And also there were hobos, as we used to call them at the time, homeless people now. But there would be camps of men. They usually didn't want much to do with kids. But you'd find empty tin cans, you'd find empty beer bottles. So there was a whole society, a mini society that existed here, unto itself, walking by on, I guess it was on Rosemount, where the guy's name was Bull, I think, who was the last mayor of Weston. I was brought into the world by a doctor named Crookshank. Crookshank is an old family in this town. There was Crookshank Motors, but there were Crookshank doctors as well. So my earliest memories are of a very complete society, a whole world that felt perfect in a way. And yet Toronto was close by, so that when I went into my teens, when I started to feel too tight in this world and wanted to ramble a little bit, we could get it downtown. And by the late 60s, downtown Toronto was a lot of fun.
So, how did Weston change when it started getting swallowed up, as you said, by Toronto?
Well, big changes happened. Big changes happened, first of all, with Yorkdale and other malls like that. What happened then is that people stopped buying stuff here in town. Things were more expensive here. And you go to a place like Yorkdale, the mall, and then many decades later, at least a couple of decades later, the big development of the 401, which in effect gets the small town, the center of town. You still have left Squibb's stationery bookstore, where I worked as a teenager. And that's, I guess, there might be a couple more remnants of that time. So everything flees. Everyone flees their shopping. And once the shopping's on, you kind of lost a center of gravity. It's kind of gone away. I have to say, before that happened, the first self-service liquor store opened up in Weston. It was like, oh, it was a big deal, because in the old days, if you wanted to buy liquor, it was behind the counter. You filled out a form, you handed it to an angry man who looked at you, and he'd go back to the warehouse, bring a bottle, and give it to you, and wrap it up in a piece of paper. But the first one opened up on John Street, across from what used to be Wolf's cycle store, in behind it, back to behind. And it was like, that was modernity. It's like, wow, you can walk in and you can look at the bottles and you can touch them yourself, which sounds super old-fashioned, super archaic, but it was a big deal at the time. So what happens to Weston is that the commercial center goes away. So what you then have is you lose that sense of a weight, of a center. Everything becomes looser. There are different spots that are important, like the library is important. I went to school around the corner at St. John's, to the Catholic school, and it was really progressive, because in those days we'd come down, we'd play baseball, which was King Street, Earl, whatever it's called now, on the corner, Alexander, something. It was King Street School. We played baseball together, which was considered a big deal. But there are all kinds of amusing, slightly religious and cultural things used to happen. So in the old days, the Catholic schools had 5 extra days of holidays. They were religious holidays. They didn't have to go to school. And one of them was the day after Halloween. And that was the best of all Catholic holidays, because you go out to Halloween the night before, you didn't have to get up early the next day. You'd fill your pockets full of candy. And then you walk up to where the public school was. You walk up and back and forth along the sidewalk, eating candy, demonstrating your superiority. You got a free day. All you suckers are stuck there in class. So that was about as rough as it ever got. Although there was a rough side too. A little bit before my time, there were Western gangs too. And in the 50s, there were rumbles as well. So it was mostly, rumble, before my brother's age than mine, a little older. That was more like chains and sort of like what we used to call it, black haircut, sort of flipped out of the back, kind of like an Elvis Presley haircut. So there were tough guys hanging around too. And you didn't want to get on the wrong side of them, because you could get beaten up if you're a boy, looking the wrong way. You could get beaten up pretty easily. Oh, so in other words, it's a whole spectrum. I don't want to leave it on the tough side. Everything was here. And again, coming back to the small town feeling, it would be not unusual to walk up the street, you pass by somebody's house, and there would be like Mrs. Wilde, the English teacher on Joseph Street, by the time we're in grade 9. And we knew she's a widow, and she's outside in snow, and we volunteer, and we dig off her sidewalk, dig off the snow, and she didn't let us in for things we'd never seen before, rumblings, very English kind of food. Very unusual. I want to add something else about Weston. We were talking about it before the camera came on. And Weston was always, the 50s and the 60s, we have kind of a television view of what the time was like. Those old shows like Father Knows Best, Centenary, even Happy Days. And those TV shows have kind of pushed out what it was actually like. So it wasn't all sort of a white bread community of people doing the same thing. And there were 4 of us who hung out early in high school. One of them, Mike Adachi and his family, They were Japanese who'd been interned during the Second World War. My own parents had come out of Eastern Europe and had lost everything and couldn't go back. It was all behind the Iron Curtain. Another friend's father had been with the Canadian Army in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong fell first at the beginning of the Pacific War. And his father had been in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, and through malnutrition was blinded, legally blind. He could see big things. And the fourth guy's father had been in the Canadian Army. So there was this incredible variety that was going on at the time. All kinds of little ethnic groups. The Italian shoemaker, the Ukrainian butcher. I can't remember the nationality of the Jew, but there was a real mix. It wasn't sort of the way we like to project into the past, a kind of a rich, easygoing, waspy kind of life. And the other thing to mention too is that Weston, for a large part, was a kind of working class neighborhood. What I mean by that is there were doctors and there were lawyers, sure, but the majority of people in our street worked in factories. My father worked in construction. So money was always tight. And in those days, Coke came in a 6-pack carton. And it was a 2-cent return on each bottle. And if you're a kid, the parents didn't notice, you take back the empties for 12 cents was a big deal. You buy a lot of chocolate bars, I think. But your parents might say, who gave you the right to take back that empty bread and pop-ups? That 12 cents is part of the family economy. So this was part of that kind of a struggling was part of it as well. One more thing I want to add too is that it was a boom time in another way. So there's Old Weston, of course, the old center of Weston, the historic center. But Weston is much bigger than that. And where I grew up, it was just beyond. It was on the edge of town. 401 hadn't been built yet. There were vast farmlands, empty orchards, ponds, streams. Black Creek was a stream out in that place. So you had very much a sense of being on the edge of town. And boom. The major sound of my childhood is houses being built. Hammers hammering roofs. They're bang, 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 build, and skill cells going all the time. So there's Old Weston, there's on the edge of nature, and then all of nature which is brought up when you're a kid. It's the best thing in the world because nobody owns that farm anymore. Someone's going to build houses there. There's an old farmhouse. All the windows are long since broken, but you could go up into the attic. You can catch frogs down by the pond. So all of this happened at the same time.
Okay. So, you talked about your early memories of Weston life in general. What specific memories do you have about the Weston Library?
The Weston Library was crucial for me because in a small town, edge of town, this was the land of hockey. Also kind of a working class thing. So as I mentioned, there might be some fights around too. You were only as good as how far you could hit a ball with a baseball bat or how many goals you could score. I was a lousy sportsman. My brothers were great. And when I got to high school, they said, here comes another one. And it's a disappointment. So there's always those kids for whom they don't quite fit in one way or another. So no place to play hockey. You don't want to. You're the last one chosen. So kind of from a reader type of person. I don't want to say intellectual because in Canada, in general, the term intellectual is not that popular. But the Weston Library was like an island of hope because you go into this place, it was full of riches. It was full of worlds beyond this world. So if Weston was a society unto itself, the library provided a window to many, many, many other worlds. For me in particular, up at the Catholic school, which was just St. John's, which was just around the corner, every second Friday they'd bring us down to the library. They'd come into this very room, which was the kids' room at the time. And I remember the librarians giving us tips, for example, saying things to me like, you're reading all science books, why don't you try a novel? My father had been a carpenter, my mother was a chemist, so they were kind of a science family. Novels, what are those for? And she got me hooked and I never looked back. And then, when you get a little bit older, there's the upstairs. I can't remember the exact age. I think you had to be 13 to go upstairs to the adult library. And by the time you're about 10 or 11, like chafing to get up there. And The way they had it set up, you go up the steps, and actually the desk was behind a wall on the other side. So you couldn't take the books out yet as you were 13. You could look at them. I remember taking the book off the shelf. I was underage, so I must have been 11 or 12. It was a book about Rasputin and his role in the revolution. And it was astonishing to me, like, wow, there's a world here. And then beyond that, there's another thing that happens. So here, this is where you come to get the treasure you're going to take home. And then the other good thing was, because for me it was a walk, it was about a 15, 20-minute walk to my house. And on the way, you'd see other people. And so you got to recognize one another, the ones carrying books. So everybody, all the boys carried a hockey stick, or they carried a glove or something. From time to time, often girls, but not just girls, you see them carrying a book. Well, that's one of my people. If we can stop them, what are you reading? And that opens up, in my case, because I went into literature, that opened up, thanks to this library, thanks to the people in it, and those who attended it, it opened up the whole world.
Okay, so basically, what role did the library play for you as a young child?
Yeah, well, as a young, I see a lot of kids groups, play groups in libraries now. As a young child, I didn't have that. It only came to me in elementary school. And those regular trips here, the library is a little bit, Friday afternoons, teachers are awfully smart. They don't want to work too hard on a Friday afternoon, and neither do the kids. So typically, 1 week you have art in the afternoon on Friday. So that's great. You finger paint, you got this mess you're doing. And the other day you go to the library. So the library was associated with me with kind of free time, fun, and it's really fun.
All right, so as an author, would you say the library has helped you to develop your professional skills?
Yeah, the library is critical. It's funny how one evolves with the library over time. I have the good fortune now of working in a place where most of my books are paid for. So I can pretty much read whatever I want. And if I need it fast, I can just ding and have it in. If I need it fast, I will ding down on my Kindle. But because most of the books that I write are historical, I need research. And no matter how good Google may be, it's not good enough. So I have been going to the library. I kind of moved mostly to the Robarts Library at the University of Toronto. Because there, I have to go into arcane details of history of Eastern Europe, sometimes in another language. And again, there's a vast, vast wealth of material there. I'm also grateful to them because I've just turned 16. I've got a lifetime of writing materials. I don't know what to do with that stuff. So the Rare Book Library at the Robarts has taken in all of my files. So now I know they're in a safe place, and I don't have to worry about what to do with them. So the library, it evolves as time goes on. And I got to tell you a story as well. Libraries are important. When I was at school at U of T downtown, each college at U of T had its own library. By this point, I'm using the university library, not so much in Weston anymore. And there was this cute girl, like a part-time job, in the library. And I spent a lot of time hanging around the counter of that library. And when she told me she was going to Paris to study art, what did you do? I had to follow her, and I had to marry her. So the library was important in my personal relationships too.
All right. So those are the questions I have for you today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about your memories or about the library?
Just this. Librarians are some of the finest people in the world. They provide worlds to kids who are lost. They provide refuge to kids who are lost, kids who don't fit in. There are many worlds available in the library, and the librarian opened the doors to me for what I could see. Librarians have opened the doors to a lot of kids and even a lot of adults. So I love this library, and I love librarians too.
All right, so I understand that you also have some pictures from your time when you were younger here.
Yeah, I've got an old album, it's all falling apart, of pictures. I have some of the old high school books as well. But there are two photos here. One is St. John's Separate School, grade 5, 1964. And it's amazing to me that there are a few of us boys wearing ties. I don't think you'd ever see that again. And I can see in the picture that not only am I wearing a tie and a jacket, but I've got a little puff sticking out of the shirt. And boy, I can name most of the people in here, including in particular Barbara Swanik. Swaniks are important at Weston. Barbara Swanik, I had a crush on her from grade 5 all the way up to grade 8. So she's important to me. And then it flips the page, and there's another photograph here. It's the Weston Collegiate Institute, and it says 1968, so it's my grade 9 class. Now, there's some similar sentiment in there, just that the name changes. So there I see a picture of Jane Mertens, my first real girlfriend. And we still keep in touch every decade or so. But by God, do I have fond memories of her. Not so much of a guy in the corner who the following year pretty much broke my nose walking between the boardwalks and the Weston Collegiate, where we got into a fight, which was part of what happened in those days too. So those are the two photos, and there's a whole miniature biography of my youth.
Alright, so on behalf of the Toronto Public Library, I'd like to thank you for coming in today. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And curious, thank you for it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's great. Now I understand you want to know something about that book, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I just happened by accident to have a copy of this book, which is called Buying on Time. Came out in 1997, and it's still in print all these almost a couple decades later. And this is a story of Weston at the time, the 50s and 60s, goes right up to the early 80s. But a lot of the world of this place of Weston and the Weston Library, and in that whole period in history, are all in here. And it's supposed to make people laugh. And as far as I can tell, they're still laughing. So thanks for asking me. Oh, there it is. Thanks for asking me about it.